So as someone who has an interest in basically all things spooky, I have heard a ton of ghost stories in my days. Stories of those who have been haunted, have seen apparitions, and even stories of those who have been possessed. But out of all these stories I've heard, none have struck me quite like this one. This is the story of a ghost hunter who died under mysterious circumstances just 3 years ago. It's a story so strange that it's left many people convinced that something paranormal was to blame. This is Gaurav Tiwari, the man who was apparently killed by a ghost. So that leads us to this question: who or what could have done this to him? So Gaurav Tiwari was more than just your typical ghost hunter. He was the founder and CEO of the Indian Paranormal Society. He was featured in multiple TV programs from all across the world and was even at one point dubbed the most famous ghost hunter in India. So it's safe to say that he was very well respected in his field. Now, as part of his job with the Indian Paranormal Society, Gaurav would often visit and cleanse the homes of those experiencing paranormal activity. Now, this eventually led him to a house in West Delhi that was apparently home to an evil and violent spirit. He visited the house on July 6th, 2016, and returned early the next morning on the 7th. And it was that morning at approximately 11 a.m. that his wife and his father heard a loud thud coming from the upstairs bathroom. Now, the door to the bathroom was locked, but his father was able to break it open, which revealed Gaurav laying on the floor, gasping for air, with a thin black line around his neck. Gaurav died shortly after. So what happened behind this locked bathroom door that caused Gaurav to die? Was it a suicide, or murder, or something paranormal? Hi guys, I want to add a disclaimer here that we're going to be discussing suicide in this next section and basically for the rest of the video. So if you guys are uncomfortable with that subject matter, then I would recommend turning the video off now. So upon initial investigation, the most prominent theory out of the gate was that Gaurav had committed suicide. But immediately questions arose. His family claimed that he was a genuinely happy individual, and obviously he was also experiencing a ton of success surrounding his career. And it's said that in the days and the weeks leading up to his death, he was, for the most part, happy. So what could have set him off? What could have caused Gaurav to suddenly feel so low that he took his own life? Well, it turns out something did happen that may have led him to do just that. So for starters, Gaurav's father, who had been living with him and his wife, had confronted Gaurav about his career earlier that week. Now, details of this event in this conversation are fairly scarce, but I get the impression that Gaurav's father didn't totally approve of his career choice, and that his father wanted him to pursue something else. Now, obviously, this type of pressure is not good for your mental health, and one could have assumed that Gaurav would be extremely upset about this, considering how passionate he was about his work, and also how hard he had worked to get to where he was. The second thing that may have led to his suicide actually happened the morning he returned home on the 7th, which was the morning that he died. Now, at roughly 2 a.m., Gaurav came home after cleansing that house that I had told you about earlier. Now, upon entering the home, he was greeted, or rather confronted, by his wife, who was extremely upset about the hours he had been working at this job. Gaurav's wife thought that he was working too hard and that these hours that he was working were putting a strain on their relationship. Now, the argument between them was actually so severe that they ended up sleeping in separate rooms that night. So twice in a weeks-long span, Gaurav's profession was called into question by those that he loved, which would obviously be two serious blows to anyone's mental health. But then there's a third thing, and this third thing may sound insignificant to a lot of people, but it's definitely worth talking about. So right before Gaurav had entered the bathroom that morning, he had been checking his emails for roughly about half an hour to an hour. So maybe somebody sent him something nasty, or he got a really mean email or something that set him off. I mean, at this point, his mental state was already probably a little fragile due to the constant bombardment of his family who were judging his career path. So maybe he received an email that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, it's possible. Now, shortly after Gaurav's death, it was determined that he died from asphyxiation, or in other terms, he suffocated to death. So coupling this with the dark bruising around his neck, investigators quickly determined that Gaurav had hung himself. So where is the paranormal side of this case? I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry, right? I'll tell you this case is not quite as simple as it seems. Okay, so let's talk about the flaws in the suicide theory. So for starters, Gaurav and his wife had actually made peace early that morning. They were kind of back on track in a way. Also, if Gaurav had actually received some mean-spirited emails that may have pushed him over the edge, then police probably would have investigated that, and they definitely would have reported on it. And there's one more big thing. The thing that kind of cracks this case wide open. So remember how I said that police had officially reported that Gaurav had hung himself? Well, there was no rope in the bathroom, and there was nothing around his neck when his family walked in. It was almost like he was being strangled by something that they couldn't see. But the strangeness doesn't stop there. So medical experts were called in to determine his cause of death, and they determined that he had in fact died of asphyxiation. But they also determined that it would have been practically impossible for Gaurav to do this to himself. There was nothing in that bathroom that he could have used to kill himself in this way. So they called the death a suicide, but allegedly it wasn't even possible for him to have done that to himself. So that's a pretty big flaw. So that leads us to this question: who or what could have done this to him? Okay, could Gaurav have been murdered? Probably not. Almost certainly not, actually. Because keep in mind, that bathroom door was locked from the inside. So nobody could have opened that door, killed him, and then gone out, because the door was locked and you can't lock it from the outside. And also, his family surely would have seen someone walk in, walk up the stairs, and commit murder. They would have seen it, or at least heard it. So the theory of him being murdered is actually somewhat impossible. Okay, so at this point, this case really doesn't make too much sense. So if he hadn't killed himself, and if he wasn't murdered, how could he have died this way? And this has led to the popular theory that Gaurav was killed by an evil spirit. People believe that a spirit might have attached itself to him while he was cleansing one of these properties. And people think that the spirit followed him and tormented him, and eventually one day killed him. It sounds crazy, right? And maybe it is, but there is actually some evidence to back this up. So for starters, Gaurav had told his family in the months leading up to his death that he had felt a strange dark presence around him, following him around. And he claimed that he was being followed and watched by something paranormal. Also, Gaurav had actually talked about ghosts being able to cause black markings, almost like bruising, on the bodies of those that they are haunting. Strange black markings, kind of like the one found on Gaurav's neck when he had died. He would say that these injuries could be caused by vengeful spirits. So maybe he ran into a vengeful spirit, and that's what killed him. That isn't all though. In the weeks leading up to his death, Gaurav's father had actually spotted a dark apparition in their house on multiple occasions. Now this entity paid no attention to him, but rather it seemed attached to Gaurav, and it followed him around, staying no more than a few feet behind him, just kind of watching him. So maybe it is possible that Gaurav picked up some kind of evil spirit, some kind of demon, while he was cleansing one of these houses. But could it have actually killed him? Well, I guess that depends on what you believe. But these events leading up to his death do make it an interesting theory. Okay, so what do I think? Well, personally, I don't think that any of these theories really offer a satisfying conclusion. But to this day, his death is still labeled as a suicide, although no new information has come out about how he could have managed to do this. Now, there are some oddball theories out there which I will quickly go through right now, one of which being how Gaurav was actually a UFOologist. I don't know if that is the official term, I do not think it is. But he also had a passion for UFOs. But as most of us know, governments don't really take too kindly to that kind of stuff, especially here in the United States. So maybe he was taken care of. Maybe he was silenced. Hey, like I said, these are oddball theories, okay? Now, there is one other theory that I do find interesting, but again, it's kind of an oddball one, and I'm really not in a position to say that this actually happened, so I'll just leave it out there. And that's the theory that Gaurav did in fact commit suicide, and his father and his wife didn't want this suicide to taint his legacy and the family name. So they got rid of the noose or whatever he had used to commit suicide and began pushing the theory that a ghost had done this. Now, like I said, I don't want to blame them. I don't want to put that on them. So I don't know. It's just a theory. Take it however you want it. It's frustrating because these theories really just leave us with more questions than answers. And it seems like for now, at least, we'll never really know for sure what happened to Gaurav Tiwari. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you soon with another video.